If you clicked on this video because New Year planning already feels a bit much, or you feel tired of goals that sound good in January but don't really hold you through the year, this video may be for you. Today I'm not planning the year, I'm writing a letter. And I'm curious what happens when we begin a year with kindness instead of pressure. Hello, my crafty friend. I'm really glad you are here and we can do this page together today. You can see my junk journal planner in front of me with bits and pieces from my January printable. And let's take the first page of the January signature out, because I always find it easier to craft and decorate without the page being in the planner. And it's so easy with the traveler's notebook style that we can take it out. Would like to use some of the fussy cut printable pieces to create today's page. This year I want to start differently, not with a list of things I should do better or a plan who I should become. I want to start with the relationship with myself. And what I would like to do, I would like to create a page that will hold a letter I'm writing now in January to be opened in December. So when I open it in December, I will write back to myself. And then next year in January again, I will do the same again. This is the first time I'm doing this, so I don't yet know how it will feel at the end of the year. I just know it feels right to begin this. So, if you feel like crafting along, you are very welcome. And if you are just here to watch, that's completely fine too. Sometimes it's enough to just sit with a quieter pace for a while. I have cut this page to size. I use an A4 page. It's a coffee dyed page. And I cut it down to 7 inches. And now I'm marking a little piece that is 3/4 of an inch wide. And then I'm folding the paper up to exactly that line, pressing it down with my fingernails, and if you have maybe even a bone folder to make the folds really crisp, it's easier then to fold the entire letter later. I open it up again and then I'm using my ruler to mark the wider side at 4 and at 8 inch to fold it down later. So as I measure and fold the paper, I can feel myself already settling a little bit more. I always notice how working with paper does that. You can't rush it, I find. You have to pay attention and your hands slow your thoughts down almost without noticing. I chose this old airmail style fold here because I love that the letter becomes its own envelope. There's something very honest about that, I find. No extra layers, no hiding. The words fold into themselves and that's enough. And while I'm folding, I'm thinking about how often time just rushes past. Weeks blur, months blur, and then suddenly it's December and I'm trying to remember what this year actually felt like. Not what I did, not what I achieved, but how it felt to live it. This letter feels like a small way of saying, I was here, this matters, even if no one else ever sees it. Right now, I'm not thinking what I will write later. I'm just making place for it, a container for my words. I'm cutting the top little flap off on the right hand side and then I cut on an angle, and then on the other side I wonder if I can use this. Katjana, you would have to turn it around to find the same angle. Sometimes these things are so difficult for me. So I cut it by hand. That's good enough. And then I cut off this flap as well, because the leftover little piece will be the closure of our letter at the top. Can you see? Folding it in and then folding it up here. And then we have the little slab here on top to have our little letter. I always like to use my Distress Oxide ink to go around the edges of the pieces I'm using for my junk journal. And so I do this with the letter, but I also do this around the edges of the fussy cut pieces from my little printable. Here, this open book, I thought would be a nice pocket for my letter. If I use here my circle punch to cut into the top, it's easier to get my letter in and out. And of course, I'm using my Distress Oxide ink again. So, let me see. The letter can go in here. I think that's nice. I think I will continue just decorating the planner page here that is holding my letter for the rest of the year. So, and as I'm gluing my pocket down, I keep coming back to the idea that this letter isn't just something I'm making once and forgetting. It's something that will travel with me. It will sit quietly inside my January signature and then move through the months, page by page, not asking for my attention, not interrupting my days, but still being there with me. And I really like that. It feels a bit like a relationship that doesn't demand constant checking in, but doesn't disappear either. And as I add this city landscape here and look through my little pieces here, how I can decorate this page even further, I find myself thinking about correspondence in a broader sense, about how writing letters used to be a way of staying connected across distance and across time. You write without knowing exactly how and when the letter would be arriving. You just trust it would arrive when it's meant to. Writing to a future version of myself feels a bit like that. I don't know who she will be. I don't know what she will have been through. And yet, I'm writing to her anyway. There's something very tender about that, I find. It asks me to relate to myself as someone who will grow and change rather than someone I need to manage or control. The tiny letter I'm adding here makes me smile. It's such a small detail, but it holds a lot of meaning for me. It reminds me that relationships are built in small gestures and moments that might look insignificant from the outside, but matter deeply from the inside. The little tuck-in on top of the page in this corner feels similar to me. It's not the focal point of the page, but it creates a place where something can be held safely. And the little envelope I would like to add on the bottom, maybe I can do this in a similar way. I can also make a tiny pocket out of it. But first, let's get down the landscape, and I don't think we need even more pockets. I think I can put this one down completely. I find so often we try to remember our lives by holding everything in our head, and I love with our junk journal planners that I can put things down, because when it becomes too much, I can feel like I'm failing somehow, like I should be better at remembering, better at keeping track. But memory doesn't work that way. Memory needs places to land. It needs cues, it needs texture, it needs anchors. And so this page is becoming one of those anchors for me. It's not trying to capture the whole year. It's just creating a home for one moment at a time. A way of saying, this matters enough to give it a place. And as I layer these elements, I'm also thinking about how being in relationship with myself doesn't mean constantly reflecting or analyzing. It often means creating conditions for myself where I could reflect later. That's what this page is doing for me. It's not asking me to think about the letter every day. It's just making sure it has somewhere to be, somewhere it is welcome, somewhere it can sit until I come back to it. And this page isn't about decoration for decoration's sake. It's about care. It's about creating a space that says, you belong here, your words belong here, your hopes belong here, you pay attention to that, you had fun doing this, you gave yourself some time and space to just play around and have a good time. And I think that's something many of us need more of. Not more plans, not more systems, just more places where parts of our lives are allowed to rest. When life gets busy, when days blur together, when weeks pass without much pause, memory needs somewhere to put its feet down for a moment. And this page is that place for me. So I'm adding a few things on the outside of the letter itself. A stamp, a label, little details that mark this as something intentional. Not urgent, but intentional. And for me, there's a big difference between those two. And I notice how rarely I let things be intentional without also making them feel really pressured. And today, I want to give myself time. Because I notice writing to my future self feels surprisingly emotional. I think it's because I really don't know what kind of year this will be. I don't know what will be easy. I don't know what will be hard. I don't know what will be asked of me or what might change me in ways I can't see yet. So instead of trying to plan for all of that, I'm choosing something else here. I'm choosing to trust my future self to just be with whatever happens and to meet whatever life will come up with. That in itself feels like a huge shift. So much of the time we stay in relationship with ourselves through monitoring, checking, correcting, asking whether we are keeping up. This feels different. This feels like staying in relationship through trust, through letting something to be held without hovering over it. The letter will wait for me. It doesn't need anything from me in the meantime. So, and as I write Open December 2026 on the label, I can feel I'm ready now to write the letter to December me. I feel ready to let the words flow in whatever way they want, allowing my current self to just express where I am, just now. That feels like enough. And as I write January 2026 in the corner and begin with Dear Gajana, I'm very aware that this isn't something I need to perform. These words are just for me. I'm telling my future self how I'm doing right now, what I'm carrying into this year, what feels heavy, what feels steady, what am I quietly hoping for. Not goals, not promises, just hopes. Hopes feel softer. They don't demand anything. They just point in a direction. So now I'm finishing my little label, sealing the letter with it, and closing it fully. This part feels important, almost like a small ceremony. There's a difference between something being finished and something being complete. And closing this letter fully, it feels complete in a way that's very settling. Once it's sealed, the words get to rest. I don't need to improve them. I don't need to explain them. I don't need to come back and see if they still make sense. They've been said, they've been heard, they are held now. I think we really underestimate how comforting containment can be. How calming it is to know that something doesn't need our attention right now. That it is safe to leave it as it is. So much of the time we carry things around in our heads because we don't quite trust that they will be okay if we put them down. We keep revisiting, refining, worrying, and this feels like the opposite of that. Sealing the letter feels like giving myself permission to stop, to step back, to let the relationship with my future self breathe. So, as my hands finish this part, I can feel my body settling down. It's like my shoulders soften, my breath is deepening. This feels like saying to myself very simply, you have done enough to meet the year ahead. And that's a message I don't say to myself often enough. Looking at the finished letter, I find myself thinking less about the page and more about the relationship it represents. So much of our lives are shaped by the relationships we have with others. We put time and care into them, we check in, we repair when something feels off, and yet the relationship we live inside of all the time, the relationship with ourselves, often get the least attention. This letter feels like a small but meaningful way of changing that. When I write to my future self, I'm acknowledging that she matters to me, that who I will become is worth speaking to with kindness, not instructions. And when I imagine opening this letter in December, I'm also making space to meet my younger self, the one who wrote it, with curiosity instead of judgment. That to me is real connection. And there's also something happening here that goes even deeper. This letter isn't just between January me and December me. It's also a way of staying in relationship with all the different parts of me that show up over a year. The hopeful parts, the tired parts, the parts that try hard, the parts that need rest, the parts that feel confident and the parts that feel unsure. This letter doesn't ask them to disappear or improve. It simply gives them a place to be acknowledged. And that matters. If this way of connecting with yourself speaks to you, I hope you find a way to explore it that feels right for you. It doesn't have to look like this. It doesn't have to be written. What matters is the intention to turn towards yourself rather than away. Thank you for spending this time with me, for sharing this quite relational moment. I'll see you again very soon.